Hi, I'm Josh Nelson with Nelson Elder Care Law, and we are joined by a longtime friend of the firm, Stephanie, from Canterfield and Kennesaw. Today, we're going to be talking about all the things that you need to know in regard to what are the different levels of care, how do we have conversations with our loved ones, how do we make sure that we're picking the right community that supports our needs and goals. So, Stephanie, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We're really excited. You've been with Canterfield for, I think, 7 years now. Is that correct?
7 years. Can you believe it?
And I think that's really cool because whenever we look at communities, they tend to have a pretty high turnover. And I think one of the things that really sets Canterfield apart is that their staff has been there a long time. Stephanie's been there ever since they first opened.
Yes, before we even had a building.
It's always fun opening those. We'll kind of dive in as we go through. And she's been there as they've grown through having assisted living, memory care, independent cottages, and independent living. So things that we can talk about from all spectrums of the care scope to help us determine what might be best for you or your loved one. And so go ahead and just tell us a little bit about your journey with Canterfield.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you how I got into senior living, which is, I think, very interesting. I worked for Hilton Hotels for many, many years. My kids were little at the time. We're at dinner one night. My son says, "Are you going to answer your phone again? Are you going to miss my game again this weekend?" And it got me thinking, I need a better work-life balance. And another senior living community was actually one of my clients at the hotel. And I went and asked them, "How do you think I do in senior living sales?" And they said, "When do you want to start?" So I started my journey in senior living, and it's been extremely rewarding. It's very hospitality based.
So it's done right.
Exactly. But switching from a hotel environment to a senior living environment was an easy slide in. I may work weekends, but I'm not working 12 hours and doing weddings. So not yet.
Well, I can see where that's a smooth transition for the type of care that Canterfield does. I mean, I think there's places out there, especially some of the personal care homes or some of the lower end communities that don't focus as much on that hospitality, but those are the places that don't have the same longevity or consistency with the staff, right? They're the high turnover places. And so one of the things that I love about Canterfield is whenever I go over there, not only do you guys know the people as people, like you really know the people that live in your community by name, kind of where they're at, which is amazing to me with so many people, how you keep track of everything. But even more so, the staff seems happy. And I think one of the things that people looking at communities struggle with is how do we tell the difference between this property versus this property? And whenever I get asked that, it's so much about like, what's the engagement of the staff? And so what do you guys do over at Canterfield that sets you apart in that arena?
Well, we want it to feel like home to both our staff and our residents. The staff spends probably more time at Canterfield than they do at home. So it's important that they feel comfortable as well. They get a free employee meal while they're there, but they also know all of the residents' names. We make it high priority that everybody is greeted by name. We also want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. I can't fix it if I don't know it's broken, but it's also huge to have that insight of the good stuff so we can keep doing that and change the things that aren't working for us.
Yeah. And I know that you guys have a great reputation in the senior care community. You guys do well with Google and Facebook reviews and stuff like that. But if I was coming and talking about placing my loved one, my mom, what are some things that I need to be looking for? Let's just start at kind of the independent level and say, what should I evaluate a property on?
Yeah, definitely the food. Food is going to be the number one thing. I always say there's a couple of things in senior living you do not mess with. One of those is food, one of those is bingo, and one of those is the beauty salon. So you got to have all three of those components. But a lot of folks will say, we have great food. Make sure you try the food. Go during a mealtime. Experience an activity so you really get the full value of the property.
I love that, but I think so many times people have a hesitancy just because of horror stories and probably just a lack of education, which hopefully we can fix today. So whenever somebody's thinking about an independent living or assisted living in the last 10 years, it's changed drastically from like a nursing home that we think of or our parents think of. Kind of where do these different care levels come from, and what should we expect whenever we call up or fill out your web form or something like that?
So the number one thing is the folks that are looking for senior living in that age bracket, their thought process is that this is a nursing home because back when they were doing this for their parents, that was all that was available. Now I would say it's more like living on a grounded cruise ship. You have all these amenities and activities. I would say as an adult child looking for your parent, make sure you pick your two favorites. Don't take your parents to 10 of these properties. It's overwhelming, it gets confusing, I get them jumbled. Pick your two favorite and take them to those two.
I love that just because I think we can get overwhelmed or fatigued, or sometimes maybe our parent will find one thing they don't like about this one that we kind of tacked on because we didn't know that it was the right one, but we thought, oh, maybe we'll try it out. Explain it to me like I'm five, though. So I'm getting ready to have a conversation with my parents. I'm thinking that it's time for us to start those conversations. If I reach out to Canterfield, do I just call? I put in like a web form from your website. I mean, I think phone calls now are so scary for people.
Sure.
I put in a web form, for example. What happens next? What's the next step?
Then I'm going to be the one reaching out to you.
Okay.
I'm going to do what I call a discovery. I want to find out what you're looking for. What are your parents' needs? Then we can kind of decide, are we leaning more towards independent living or is it more of an assisted living kind of need? And we also kind of have a bridge in between them. So in independent living, if you only need a few services, we work with Comfort Care, who is an in-home care company, but they can provide some of those services in our independent living. I think it's a lot easier to talk to mom and dad about independent living as opposed to assisted living. Independent living, you have more of a full apartment, full kitchen. Even though we provide those meals, having a full kitchen makes it feel more like home. It's an easier stepping stone. But a lot of times I see people in panic mode. Something's happened. Mom's broken her hip. What do I do now? Well, that's where we need to really discover and find out what is mom capable of? Where do we need to be?
Yeah, I think that's a big kind of understanding point is that this can start with essentially like a apartment plus,
Sure.
right? It's the kind of thing where they still have their autonomy. Nobody's coming in and like scrubbing their backs or anything like that, unless they have a health incident or a fall or something that needs it. And even then, you might be able to get comfort care to come in and do some of those things without even needing to move to the real assisted living.
Exactly. But in both, or really in all three levels of care, I want folks to know that they still have as much independence as they can have. We're not taking away your independence. You can come and go. We're there to assist you with your activities of daily living.
I think that's an important part too, is that in independent living, especially, there's still a lot of people driving.
Absolutely.
But even in assisted living, there's still people that can drive.
Absolutely.
It's not where, your kids put you somewhere. It's not where you put mom or dad somewhere. These are the kind of things where we have the flexibility to make sure that people are still keeping their independence and their autonomy. I think Canterfield does a great job with that.
Thank you. It's maintenance-free living with services if you need them.
I love that. We talked a little bit about the independent. You go through your discovery call. We talk about what it's independent or assisted. What's the next step? Do I get my parents to come in right away? Do I make an appointment? You said maybe check out the food. Do we come in for like lunch, or what do we do next?
Sure. We can do lunch or dinner. I always highly recommend coming in at a mealtime. For one, you kind of get that bird's eye view of other residents because I think, two, a lot of people think, oh, they're all going to be in wheelchairs or they're all going to be on walkers, and that's not necessarily the case. But they get a bird's eye view of other residents. They can talk with other residents, and they get to try the food, which is a big factor. Because I can tell you all day long that I have great food, but until you experience it, you don't know that I'm telling the truth.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, meeting the people, So often what we see at Nelson Elder Law is whenever people lose their spouse or they lose some of their mobility, they get really sad because they lose that connection with people.
Sure.
I think that's one of the things that people forget about with communities is you're rebuilding those friendships, you're rebuilding those connections that might bring somebody back out of their shell after they've lost a loved one or after maybe they were struggling with making sure their medicines are right, things like that. Sometimes that consistency gets them back out where they're communicating, they're doing activities.
Right.
I know what they are, but can you share some of our watchers today about what are some of the activities that you really see people thrive at?
Well, I'll start out by saying socialization is extremely important for all of our health. And I think COVID really, that bad C word, really put a damper on socialization, especially for the elderly, because they were scared to go out or they couldn't go out. So living in a community, it's built in. We have a plethora of activities. We start every day with an exercise class, and that's in all three areas of care, actually. And then if you're into arts and crafts or you're into, let's see, we have pretty much anything and everything you can think of. We built rockets and go to Shaw Park and set them off. We go on field trips. We go on shopping trips. There's truly something for everyone.
So I think that's one of the things that a lot of us have seen out in the community is like the Canterfield buses, right? So what all is available through that? Sometimes I see them over at like the physical therapy office, but sometimes I see them over at the mall too.
Sure.
How does that system work so that if I'm working, I'm not retired yet, like my loved ones getting taken care of through that system?
Absolutely. So we have scheduled transportation days. So we have shopping days where we go to Publix, Walmart, the dollar store, Hobby Lobby. We have physicians appointment days. So if you are working and can't take your loved one to their appointment, then we will take them there for you. We also do a lot of outings like Josh just mentioned. So that could be Gibbs Gardens, that could be a picnic in the park. There are just plenty of places that we go, and we go somewhere every week.
I love to hear that. And so we've talked a little bit about independent, which is kind of that apartment plus, and then there's a bridge that maybe goes into assisted. With the assisted, describe the different levels of care. So again, if I'm new to this and I'm thinking about what my mom might need, where do we have like is it a doctor that prescribes it? Is it a nurse that looks them over? Is it me? Is it the community? Kind of how do we decide what level of care? Like a parent needs?
Absolutely. And we have 5 levels of care depending on what is needed by the individual. So that's determined through 2 different ways. One of those is a physician's evaluation form that would either be filled out by their primary care or their neurologist. That's step 1. They'll also need a tuberculosis test. Those 2 forms are good for 30 days. After that, they would have to be redone. Then our nurse is going to go and meet them either in their home or they can come and visit us at the community and we can do it there. It's really an interview with our nurse to make sure that we can keep them happy and healthy. And we ask the questions about those activities of daily living, dressing, bathing, ambulating. And I get certain points for those. I can do it all alone, or I might just need someone to stand by while I'm doing it, or I might need full hands-on assistance. So those 2 documents are going to determine that level of care. We also understand there's an adjustment period for anybody in a new situation. So we do that initial assessment, then we do one after 14 days of being there, and then every 6 months or as needed. So that care level can go up or down.
Yeah. I think that's really helpful because it's not a one size fits all kind of thing. If my mom just needs help with, medication management, maybe it's a little bit cheaper than if we need to do showers and everything too, right?
Exactly.
So I love that approach. I think that it helps balance people's budgets a little bit more because even with the price of normal apartments going up, sometimes senior living can be harder to budget for. And that's where sitting down and making sure that your parent knows not only what they need now, but what that care progression might look like and how you're going to be able to afford it is so key. That's one of the things that we can do at Nelson Elder Law is walk you through how you can actually afford these things. It's not just a $5,000 or $6,000 a month bill. It's something that we can justify on how it makes sense based on what somebody's retirement, their income, government benefits, and retirement assets look like. So we're always happy to help with those things. And especially whenever you work with a community that's so driven to make sure that people get the care they need at a price point that they can afford, it really is exceptional work with Canterfield and our clients.
Thank you. We worked with you several times on helping folks get in and VA benefits and making sure that they have those documents in place, because if we do go into a situation where someone is unable to make those decisions, it's very important to have those things in place.
Well, I think that brings up a good point. What we feel are two of the most important things people can have whenever they're having some of these conversations about communities, especially moving outside the home, isn't a will and it isn't a trust. It's really a healthcare power of attorney, what we call an advanced directive for healthcare in Georgia, as well as a financial power of attorney.
Exactly.
That makes it so that if somebody transitions into a community and has a health event, like a fall or anything like that, the community has the power to be able to deal with somebody that's conscious. If I'm woozy or dizzy or something like that because I just had a tumble, I want to make sure that somebody of the right mind that I know, like, and trust, probably one of my children, is making those decisions. And I think from the community's perspective, you guys appreciate that too.
100%.
And then also, one of the things that people often give up once they do transition to a community is the stress of even paying their bills. And so that's often where like a financial power of attorney can come in helpful, making sure that you can use their bank accounts to pay their bills without having to be on their bank accounts, because there's some bad things that can happen by being listed on mom's bank account, so to speak. And so those are the things that we're always going to start our families off with to make sure that they're doing well down that path. And that kind of transitions us into the next stage, which is what's past assisted living. So a lot of people get confused and think that there's just skilled nursing or just a nursing home after a traditional assisted living. But with modern medical problems such as dementia, cognitive impairment, you guys have kind of created this new model. Tell us about that.
So you can really stay at Canterfield until end of life, unless you do need skilled nursing. And I think a lot of folks don't really understand what skilled nursing is. But skilled nursing is round the clock, 24/7 care. I'm going to need a feeding tube. I have a pressure sore that's more than a stage 2 and not healing. But most folks that are living in a community that's taking care of them are not going to experience or need those things, unless it's a personal opinion of wanting a feeding tube to prolong life. We have several partners that we work with, such as Home Health, and several different hospice companies. We want the individual, if they want to be able to stay in their home through the long haul.
Well, I think it's important that most people don't really want to go to a nursing home. We work with a lot of people that are in nursing homes because they've hit a medical need to be there. But the problem is, if you ask them to raise their hand if they wanted to be there, nobody's going to be raising that hand, right? So most people want to stay at where they call home, even if that home is an assisted living or a community. And I think what we see a lot of, though, is people get concerned whenever there's a lack of cognitive ability or there's some cognitive decline, and they think that that means you have to go to a nursing home. The real issue we see with most of our clients at the stage that we find them, though, is they have good mornings or good afternoons or good moments and some not so good moments. And so they don't need skilled nursing for that level of cognitive impairment. But especially if they start becoming a wandering risk, or maybe they start becoming a little delusioned or having some aberrations that are scary to them, there's another level just beyond assisted living called memory care. And so kind of what's the transition for most people between that assisted living into a memory care model?
Well, one of the things we do at Canterfield is we really learn the individual. So we're seeing those changes a little faster. We do what we call, we try to keep the same caregivers with the same residents as much as possible. It's going to build that rapport, but it also helps us see those changes. If we're seeing where the individual doesn't have safety awareness, they're going to walk out the front door and not know where they are. it's time to start looking at memory care. We try to do what we call day programming in memory care to get them used to the environment. That it's not just oh my gosh, we're moving today. So they really get used to it. And then once they're in memory care, then they have that full level of care. We do not charge a level of care in memory care. It is all inclusive. Needs can change frequently. I don't want to have to go back to family members and say, oh gosh, now we're here, now we're here. It's strict, you know what you're going to pay for the long haul.
I think that's really great because whenever you get to that level of spend, it's important to know that we have certainty that our budget's going to last. Whenever we talk with people that are in memory care, I think the big difference that families need to understand is that people receive extra training to be part of that unit or part of that community so that they know how to deal with somebody that's going through those kind of cognitive declines. The way that you talk to them, the way that you defer information, the way that you guide them through activities takes special training and, just to be honest, more attention than what they're getting in traditional assisted living. And so tell us a little bit about how the activity is different, how the staff's different. What do people really get whenever they jump to that level?
So our memory care is a very intimate environment. There are only 20 apartments in memory care. So our care to resident ratio is very, very high in memory care. As you mentioned, our staff is trained for dementia-specific training, and we do that ongoing because it's always changing and there's different ways to handle that. So I'd say that that's the big thing. The other thing is it's hard to keep someone at home that has memory care issues. So being in a community really allows you to have that relationship as much as you can, whether it's a mother-daughter relationship, father-son, husband and wife. Let us do that hard part, and you continue to have the relationship that you can have with your loved one.
I love that. That's one of the things that we really strive for here is helping people get back to that relational setup. You can't really be the full-time caregiver of somebody with cognitive impairment and their wife. You can't really be the full-time caregiver of somebody with cognitive impairment and their daughter. All of a sudden, your relationship changes quickly. And my argument for it is that's the fleeting moments you don't want to have lost.
Right.
It's the kind of thing where if you get that extra care just a little bit earlier, you might still be able to cherish those moments of hearing mom's stories, even if it is the same story a few times over. Hearing dad tell you about his time in the war before he can't remember it. Those are the things that I think whenever people look back at, they really regret trying to keep them at home too long.
Sure.
And turning into that, well, I just need changed, I just need food, I just need medicine. Because unfortunately, whenever somebody gets cognitive impairment, a lot of times it's not really them the whole time. So it can become more argumentative, it can become more combative. And that's really where that extra training of how to help patients with that comes into play.
Exactly. And I think family members can get angry and it can be very challenging to deal with someone like that. So you do totally lose that relationship. And we want you to have as much of that as possible.
I think another part that people don't understand is that often, depending on the type of cognitive impairment, the disease causes people to become a little bit angrier towards those close to them, to lash out at the people that are there helping, just because they're the only people. You know, a lot of times what we see through adult protective services even is where the parent is accusing of the caregiver child from theft just because they're the only one that's been in the house. And really it's just that they've misplaced something. And that breaks people's hearts whenever you given it all, you're missing work, you're having your family adjust things so that you can be there for your parents. And then all of a sudden you're getting yelled at for stuff you didn't do.
Good point. And a lot of families come to me and they're concerned, well, mom is so mean to me. I'm worried she's going to be mean to your caregivers. And they're always so surprised that that usually doesn't happen. And if it does, we're trained to handle that.
Yeah, I think those de-escalation tactics are super helpful. Well, Stephanie, I absolutely appreciate you walking us through those kind of three levels of care over at Canterfield, Kennesaw. Like I said, with your 7-year tenure there, we appreciate all your knowledge and insight. How do people find you?
You can go to our website, which is canterfieldseniorliving.com. You can certainly give me a call in my office, which is 470-308-4720. I would love to help you.
Awesome. And then one of the reasons that you're here with us today is because Canterfield does a lot in the senior community around Cobb and Cherokee as well. And so you're part of a nonprofit organization that's doing some non-sales based education. You have some stuff coming up. Tell us about that.
ACAP stands for Adult Children Caring for Aging Parents. This is something unlike anything else that we've seen, and I'm so excited to be a part of it. The board is built up of many professionals that know their industry. So we've all come together, worked on these topics. There's a different topic every month. We meet the third Thursday of every month at 6:30. And the topics are just great. If there's one that works for you, please join us. If one isn't for you, then skip that one. But it's also a chance for those that do come to collaborate together, and you're not the only one dealing with this issue. I really like the fact that there is no sales pitch. There is no sales pitch. It's strictly education.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. The last thing you want to have whenever you're trying to navigate a care journey for a loved one or for yourself even is the surprise pitch at the end saying, hey, come buy this, come sign up for this. So ACAP does a really good job of just bringing in experts that have a different topic every month. It's about a 90-minute session, gives you some time to be able to talk with other professionals, other people that are going through the same kind of care journey as you. And it really focuses on these topics that are sort of what they call Google proof. They're hard to find out without just sitting there and getting the information from these experts that are right here in Cobb and Cherokee County. So thanks so much, Canterfield and Stephanie, for being a part of that.
Thank you for having me.